there have been very sharp responses from Egypt. It's not just bolstered its army presence in that area of Rafah, but it has warned Israel today, an extraordinary warning that I'm not sure has ever been uttered before, which is that it will suspend its peace accords with Israel if Israel, in fact, continues some sort of an invasion into Rafah. The United States, the White House said this could be a disaster. Israel's number one ally. Even the Saudis have issued a very sharp warning.
Now, our top story today, amid fears that Israel could launch a new offensive in the southern Gaza city of Rafah, Egypt has reportedly stepped up security along the border. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has asked the Israeli military to present his cabinet with options to evacuate civilians from Rafah. I'm joined now by Noga Tarnopolsky, journalist in Jerusalem. Noga, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Noga, tell us the latest at the moment, because that area of Rafah at the moment, we understand, is occupied by about 1.5 million Palestinians who have already moved from the north of Gaza to stay safe in Rafah. Is there a serious plan from Benjamin Netanyahu to go into Rafah to evacuate it?
Well, apparently not, because he's asked for plans, although we hear that the army, way before he made his statement, that the army has some sort of provisional plans, on the desk that they're working on already, unrelated to him. It's a moment of, huge tension, even in the general context of this war, because Netanyahu's statement yesterday, which seemed to be intentionally kind of murkily worded, it looked like he was intending to tell his hard right base, yeah, I've given orders to move in. Whereas, of course, he can't give those orders as prime minister. He can only the cabinet can. Mm-hmm. And it's a very, very dangerous proposition. Most Gazans from the entire Gaza Strip, from the north and other centers in the south, like Khan Yunis, are now huddling in Rafah. Rafah is also the border area with Egypt. So there have been very sharp responses from Egypt. It's not just bolstered its army presence in that area of Rafah, but it has warned Israel today, an extraordinary warning that I'm not sure has ever been uttered before, which is that it will suspend its peace accords with Israel if Israel, in fact, continues some sort of an invasion into Rafah. The United States, the White House said this could be a disaster. Israel's number one ally. Even the Saudis have issued a very sharp warning. So it is possible that Netanyahu was trying to wink at his base and it got out of hand, or it is possible that there are some sort of plans underway, not just to evacuate a certain proportion of the Gazans huddling in Rafah, but to actually invade. And this could really isolate Israel in a very, very serious way, even from its top allies.
Noga, the Israeli government has rejected that peace plan offered by Hamas, and they have stuck to their message, which is this ends when Hamas disappears, the complete eradication of Hamas. Now, those are strong words. How are they playing with the Israeli public? Is anyone buying the fact that even if you do eradicate Hamas, the idea that another version of Hamas won't spring up equally as quickly after what has been going on in Gaza? Are people behind this message? What's happening with the public in Israel?
What's happening with the public in Israel is filled with volatility and nuance, so it's hard to answer you in a direct and brief way. But a poll released this week showed that 51% of Israelis, so just barely their majority, actually thinks that the top issue is not eradicating Hamas, but bringing Israeli hostages still held by Hamas home. So that would argue for public support for a deal, including a fairly radical deal that could bring the hostages home. There have been any number of rumors this week, including the rumor that Israel had agreed to allow Hamas's Gazan leadership to flee Gaza, to escape the way the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat did, I think, from the 70s in Beirut. There are all kinds of things out there. Israelis are very, very gripped by the drama of the families of these hostages, civilians who were stolen mostly from their beds on a Saturday morning when the state failed to protect its southern border, and who, you know, there have been, again, terrible rumors all this week, leaks to foreign media about how many of these 136 remaining hostages are already dead, awful rumors about how they may have died. And the Israeli government and the Israeli army are making no official statement. So it's really a kind of torture for the families. And this is impacting Israelis much more, I'd say, than anything else. But it's important to state that for Israelis, the situation is one of bafflement. The government is not saying anything clear. And the prime minister's statement, which has made so much noise abroad, is not clear for Israeli ears, because Israelis know that he can't give unilateral orders to the army. So it's perceived in Israel as a bit of boasting. And I think the very alarmed reactions from abroad are not really yet being absorbed into the Israeli public space.
So, Noga, just a final question. When it comes then to the hostages, which every time we speak, you always remind us that that is at the top priority when it comes to the people of Israel. So what did they make of the Hamas offer, and what did they make of that rejection? Because that Hamas offer did provide for the release of those hostages. In a sense, would the public settle for the return of the hostages?
Yeah, I apologize that I'm interrupting you, but I think it's important to say the offer, what we call the offer, was devised in a Paris meeting between Qataris, Americans, Egyptians, and maybe Israelis. It's unclear whether or not there was an Israeli rep. This was rejected outright by Hamas, who said no, only the absolute end of any conflict, the release of 9,000 Palestinian prisoners, including those who committed the murders of October, and then we'll talk about releasing hostages.
Right.
So Hamas rejected it. For some reason, that hasn't really gotten much reporting. It is true then that the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, while the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was here, also made a very bombastic statement saying, no, 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 we won't accept it. We feel insulted by it. But Israelis were part of the negotiating team there, and he only said a loud no after Hamas had returned a response which even the White House said was just over the top. So we are right now in a stalemate.
Yeah.
All of the parties are saying no, and the civilians on all sides continue to suffer. Among them, these poor hostages.
Noga, thank you so much. Always really good to speak to you to get a clear idea of what's happening on the ground, and more importantly, how it's playing out in the public there. Noga Tarnopolsky, apologies, speaking to us from Jerusalem.